we're going to take agenda item number 9 now. So this is the draft National Treatment Centre post-occupancy evaluation report, a chunky bit of reading that I'm sure everybody enjoyed. So I'm going to hand over to Richard to introduce the paper, and then we've got some colleagues who've kindly joined us on a slightly different schedule than originally planned. So thank you, Gordon and Tina. And Richard, I'll hand over to you to take us through some of the detail there. So Richard, I'll bring you in first.
Thanks, Sarah. I'm not sure if everyone can see me or not, because I can't see anybody else. The cameras are still frozen, so I think it might be a glitch on my side. But if you can hear me, you can let me know.
I can see and hear you, in fact.
Right, okay, so it's just from my side. Right, thank you. So we've brought back the National Treatment Centre post-occupancy evaluation report. As Jerry touched on in the morning, we took this to FRP last month, and this is the final part of our governance process for submission to Scottish Government. I've asked Gordon and Tina, so Gordon from the capital planning team, who were working on the delivery of the project, and Tina from the hospital management team, who were both involved in the development of the document, to come and just to speak to the SBAR, because it's quite a chunky document today, but to answer questions afterwards if any have any questions. So I'll hand over to Gordon.
Okay. Thanks, Richard. I'll give a brief overview of the SBAR. I won't read through it, and then hand over to Tina. The post-occupancy evaluation is a requirement from Scottish Government and the SCIM guidance. The post-occupancy evaluation meets the requirement as part of the Gateway Review process by demonstrating the benefits delivered by the NTC Highland. The report and SBAR submitted, as Richard has said, for SG submission, and was submitted to EDG 28th of October last year, and FRP on the 1st of November last year. The construction of the NTC commenced in June 2020 with a construction handover in March 2023, with challenging impacts in the background such as the Grenfell inquiry and the QE reports, which impacted on the construction process as it was evolving at the time. NHS Assure were engaged throughout the process also. The lessons learned have been captured, and regular reporting to Scottish Government on performance has informed the process, and the report provides the principles for the development of infrastructure and refurbishment for clinical facilities going forward for NHS Highland. From the point of view of the delivery of our services and patient care, it provides a basis for the scheduled reviews, which are also required by Scottish Government at years 3 and 5 of operation. So there'll be further post-occupancy evaluation in 2026 and 2028. Whilst there is significant and pertinent evaluation of construction and construction challenge, there are core elements of the key clinical planning, with all of the clinical teams and NHS Highland support teams to provide the clinical delivery to our patients, and that commenced for the NTC in 2016. The key areas highlighted in the report are early engagement and collaboration with NHS personnel and architects and planners, ensuring that care requirements dovetailed with the clinical construction design. Training was a significant issue around the transition planning, and that requires to be programmed in the future following completion and handover, and that there should not be any overlap. E-health resourcing is paramount in all of our projects going forward from a number of different angles from the point of view of e-health. Workforce planning and target operating models are critical throughout the process, and data collection methods and objective monitoring must be ongoing. And I'll hand over to Tina to give some of the data that supports this from the service point of view.
Thank you, Gordon. So Gordon's touched on it, but there was evidence in the document that clearly demonstrates the challenges that the ophthalmology service in particular had in navigating their way through the transition period. During the planning and moving period, the service continued to undertake emergency and also urgent operating, and whilst non-urgent outpatient activity was stood down as part of the transition plan, it was still a requirement that the service remained operational for those site-threatening conditions where delayed treatment could have caused harm to patients, and this required careful planning with regard to staffing and skill mix, the movement of equipment and activity. The training, familiarisation combined with delivery of services did have an overall impact on the team transitioning, and this is evidenced in some of the team feedback in the document. In terms of activity, in year one of ophthalmology, Scottish Government set a target of 7,000 new outpatient appointments, and the service saw 7,360 new outpatients. Whilst the target wasn't set for return appointments, the total number seen by the service in the year was 16,968, and a total of 24,328 ophthalmology outpatients were seen in year one at the National Treatment Centre. How this compares to the numbers previously seen in Raigmore is challenging, as a whole programme of pathway reviews was undertaken with colleagues in both Service Planning and Public Health Scotland prior to the moving towards a multidisciplinary appointment type system. So this means that where a patient is required to attend and see more than one discipline as part of the patient pathway, the episode of care is recorded as one, as opposed to previously where there could have been 2 appointments booked for one pathway. Previously, the ophthalmology service had access to the modular unit at Raigmore Hospital, where all operating was undertaken, and where there is still a requirement to undertake both paediatric operating and the more complex adult operating. And this is because there are HDU and ITU facilities available on site. Access to the modular unit also provides us with a contingency plan should there ever be an occasion where it's not possible to undertake ophthalmology operating at the National Treatment Centre. In terms of activity for ophthalmology in the first year at the National Treatment Centre, the service delivered a total of 2,287 ophthalmology procedures, which was inclusive of cataracts and non-cataracts, and that was against a target set of 1,975. Due to the success of the orthopaedic model, NHS Grampian cataracts also became part of the delivery plan in year one, and we delivered a total of 185 Grampian cataracts. In terms of orthopaedics, when we opened in April 2023, a target of 1,588 ASA 1 and 2 arthroplasty cases were to be referred into the National Treatment Centre. So for the orthopaedic service, in terms of targets and delivery across the boards, NHS Highland had an allocation of 1,131 and were able to deliver 868 hips and knees, 868 hip and knee procedures in total, and that was split by 485 hips and 383 knees. The Grampian allocation was 457, and we delivered 365 cases in total, and that was split down to 198 hips and 167 knees. For the Tayside allocation, there was no target set in year one, but with engagement with Tayside colleagues and based on the successful interaction and collaboration that we had with NHS Grampian, we pulled that forward and we were able to operate on 35 hips and 36 knees for NHS Tayside. In addition to the arthroplasty operating, orthopaedics have access to Theatre B 2 days a week, and a target of 171 was set for operating on foot and ankle patients. And hand procedures, we undertook a total of 267 hand procedures against a target that was set of 164. All hand, foot and ankle patients in year one are all from NHS Highland. In total, orthopaedics delivered 82% of a target that was set at 85% efficiency for arthroplasty operating. The main reason for the target not being met was due to downtime in the arthroplasty theatres, which was on the whole based due to ventilation issues in the theatre setting. In terms of reporting, NTCH allocation and utilisation is monitored and kept under regular review to ensure that the NTC capacity is fully maximised. The Scottish Government Planned Care Performance Team and the Centre for Sustainable Delivery Planned Care Team monitor our performance and also engage with the boards throughout the year. Identification of data capture in year 3 and year 5 post-occupancy is underway, which feeds into the performance monitoring work streams and will ensure that comparison data is available for all the data points for the National Treatment Centre moving forward. Thank you. If there's any questions, Gordon, Richard and myself would be happy to answer them as best we can.
Thanks, Tina. Maybe I'll just come back in with a final couple of thoughts. So it's a really good piece of work. There's a lot of lessons learned for ourselves. So from a construction point of view, that we've identified that we probably didn't have enough time put against some of the business case stages. And we're building that into our Lochaber assumptions. particularly around about the CASA, where the energy strategy comes in, and starting these conversations early. So in terms of Lochaber, we're starting these conversations now, probably about 6 months earlier than we would have in the NTC. The importance of having the point of contact from the operational side leading or as part of that design team to form the delivery group was another success, and we feel that we've pretty good lessons learned from the soft landing side of things, maybe testing some of our maintenance service contracts prior to occupancy as well. So some really good lessons learned that we're going to be taking forward to Lochaber. But I'd just like to say thank you to the team as well for this piece of work, really detailed piece of work. I think it's probably one of the first ones we've taken back through the board for this type of process. And we're asking the board to support the submission and take moderate assurance from the report.
Thank you, Richard, and thank you, Gordon and Tina. So first of all, I think just to pick that up, what a phenomenal report, and thank you to everybody who's put the work into that. I think what struck me, as well as the successes, and lessons that you've outlined in the report itself, I think what struck me was, the depth and breadth of analysis that has gone into this, and I think that absolutely has to be commended. It certainly appears to me to be incredibly thorough, and I suppose it's a lovely feeling to think that as one of the earlier NTCs across Scotland, that learning's going to go into the wider system, and that's fantastic. But I'm really pleased to hear you say there, Richard, that we've been able to extract and apply some really key lessons from that, because that was going to be one of my questions, both in terms of potentially what we can learn that we could take into the work for the Belford, and possibly Tina, you might be able to pick this up a little bit for me, kind of learning for us around pathways and processes and how we do things, I suppose, both within the NTC but more broadly. So Tina might be able to pick that up, and I suppose just to follow that up as well, how do we keep a track of that learning as it goes through the system?
I think in terms of the work that we've done, Sarah, it's been very much about working collaboratively across all aspects of the service, making sure that we've got stakeholder engagement at every single level, and also engagement with our other boards, making sure that, again, we're identifying and they're identifying who needs to be involved in some of the process mapping events that we've undertaken in terms of planning for the National Treatment Centre. And there was a huge amount of planning work that took place prior to us being able to move into the NTC. I think there's lots of lessons learned that have been captured in that document that has been produced, and we would certainly be happy to engage in future projects and share more around those lessons learned and help with any future projects.
Okay, that's great. Thank you, Tina. Okay, colleagues, I will open up. I realised that this went through FRP as well. I unfortunately wasn't at that meeting, but if people want to add a comment or question, that would be great. Anne.
Thanks, Sarah. So clearly from the report, there's lots for everybody in the organisation, particularly those who were involved most closely in delivering the project, to be proud of. Some of the figures are pretty astonishing, particularly in terms of the budget, and even though there were a few increases, and being able to deliver through all those challenges, and the safety record, just some of the things that are pretty amazing in terms of delivery of this project. So that's the first thing to say. I just wanted a couple of areas I wanted to pick up on. First of all, just to clarify some of the numbers about the orthopaedic performance, Tina. Figures are not my strong point, I'll say straight off, so it may be that I'm reading this completely wrong, but in terms of the description of it being slightly below target and 82% of 85%. Is that because we set what we were actually aiming to deliver was 85% of the total target number? I can't remember what that was, 1,000 and something procedures. Is that what the 85% was? So we weren't actually aiming to deliver the total target number of procedures?
Yeah,
Is that correct?
That's correct, we were delivering at 85% efficiency based on us coming into a new build, all of the challenges that meant that we had to work around, and as we factored in things like audit afternoons, all of the public holidays, etc.
Yeah.
So all of that was factored into achieving the 85%. As we move forward, we're looking to increase that delivery up to 90%. And then into the future, 95%, and that's across orthopaedics and ophthalmology pathways.
Right. And how are we doing against that trajectory at the moment, would you say?
Really well, for both ophthalmology and orthopaedics. There are some challenges, but we're working through those, working collaboratively with all of our colleagues and looking at our efficiencies, working with Centre for Sustainable Delivery about how we can continue to improve on those efficiencies, making sure that we are maximising the capacity within the NTC as much as we possibly can. Okay, thanks, that's great.
The other thing that stood out for me as chair of staff governance, I guess, was that the results of the surveys were quite a bit different between patients and staff. And I appreciate the patient numbers were a lot less than the numbers that returned the staff survey, but there was a fairly noticeable percentage difference, or in right across the board, really, in the staff responses to those surveys. And I suppose I was quite surprised at that, given how wonderful, well, it appears to me, that building and working environment from the tour I had. So I just wondered if we knew anything about that. I'm afraid I wasn't able to read the detail of the workshops. There might have been something in there that I missed. And I suppose finally, and I appreciate this probably isn't part of the standard requirements of an evaluation report of this kind, but I suppose I just wondered whether we have learnt any lessons from this in terms of any impacts on the workforce or the care delivered from Raigmore, or any other facilities that care was provided from previously as a result of the centre. Thanks.
I think, Anne, in terms of the staff and the patient feedback, I think what we want to do moving forward is do more of that for both patients and staff. I think in terms of the staff, some of the negative points were really around that transitioning from from Raigmore into the NTC and the challenges that brought, and that's something that's been highlighted throughout the document, but also from the lessons learned, that we can do better there. I think in terms of enabling any teams that are moving from one area to the other, that there has to be time invested in being able to train, familiarise, and where necessary continue to deliver a service. That's certainly one of the main learning points, I would say, from the NTC. I don't know if maybe Catherine wants to come in around the Raigmore side of things. Catherine, would that be okay?
Yeah, absolutely, Tina. I think there are most definitely lessons to be learned, and one of the biggest challenges for the Raigmore side was that there was a fairly high proportion of staff that migrated from Raigmore to the National Treatment Centre, and that took some time to actually refill that capacity into Raigmore. And as you know, we've been working with Scottish Government, who have provided us with funding to put in short-term locum and agency staff capacity to help us to continue to deliver service within Rigmore to the volume that we needed to deliver it to, and that's for both orthopaedics and general surgery and ENT. And I think that is something that, in terms of the project, we didn't focus heavily enough on that and understand that whole system and the impact that that staff drainage was going to have on Rigmore. I think there's also something about, you know, people migrating out into this lovely new facility, feeling that it's a national treatment centre. It's something very, very different to working in Rigmore, which is clearly part of the Highland system. However, the board continues to be responsible for those group of staff. So I think, and Tina would probably vouch for this, having been right up the middle of it, that, you know, we've had to work with staff on that, because at times we also need some a degree of flexibility from staff to work either in the NTC to ensure resilience, or in the other way, from the NTC to Rigmore for a degree of resilience at times. And that has been, I think, one of the challenges we've had in terms of just the way we set it up and the emphasis we put on things for the staff. I hope that's helpful, Sarah.
Thank you. And I think Louise wanted to come in on one of the points as well. Louise?
Thanks, and just to say thanks for this really detailed report. It's really good to see lots of very useful things in there for us, as has been highlighted, the Loch Arbour redesign and anything else we do in the future. And just to say, having been involved in staff moving into new builds in the past, they'll always test the building because you're in it for a long time when you're a member of staff. A patient to seeing a snapshot of it and an experience from the front door, whereas staff are in the back room and finding out all the nitty-gritty bits that aren't quite how they would expect them to be. So it's not totally unusual, and I think that will settle with time as people get more familiar with the environment and get used to working there. I suppose one of the points I just wanted to reference, which has been already talked about, is the survey, and I know it's relatively small numbers, but was the intent for that particularly, am I making the assumption it was particularly to focus on the building, because there isn't much in there about what people's experience of care and treatment was, other than what's your overall experience. So I suppose just moving forward, I think future surveys need to have that focus, but I'm making that assumption that it was done for this purpose. Is that fair to say?
Yes, Louise, that's correct. It was with regards to the build, and there's certainly more work that we need to do around focusing on, I would say, staff and patient experience.
Yeah, that's helpful. And Gareth, you wanted to come in?
Yeah, just to back up Louise's point, I've been involved in various staff moves over the years, and to give a really stark example, in Dundee, the old limb fitting centre down in Broughty Ferry was closed, which was a highly outdated building with lots of issues, and I think it's part of human nature that you went to a purpose-built facility that was really good, and people still experience that transition and change. So you should always expect a little bit of a kind of dip, regardless of how good the facilities or the processes are. So I think probably on balance, the overall takeaway from it is probably a fairly positive experience for most folk in the context of quite a big change.
Okay, that's helpful. Thanks, Gareth. And David, please.
Yeah, I mean, I think credit to the team that have been involved both in the planning process, the launch, and execution of it. After the excitement of going into a new building settles, as we say, it then takes a time of familiarity, and the team have worked very well together through that. I mean, I think both, and if Fiona was here, she'd say the same, but the feedback we would receive informally from patients has been extremely high. Actually, from patients, I've never heard a negative experience identified. Now, I'm sure there will be, but unusually so. It's tremendously positive from members of the public that I would meet. So I think that's a great credit to the team and the approach that they have got. While there are things to work through, their professionalism in approaching the public in terms of dealing with patients has been extremely good, and therefore that adds to that full experience. So I think it's something we should be very proud of, and the fact that we're servicing a number of different boards, that further enhances our reputation as it goes out as well. So, thanks.
Absolutely, thanks, David. I'll take Steve, and then we'll wrap this one up. So, Steve, I'll bring you in, please.
Sorry, Sarah, just a random question because I couldn't quite get my head around the assurance level. I was just wondering why this isn't substantial and it's moderate, given the conversation that we've just had and the success of the whole project and how it's delivering. So a genuine question. I'm not sure why.
No, it's a good question. Richard?
Yeah, we did have this conversation actually, Steve, but because this has been submitted to Scottish Government, we've still to get that feedback from themselves, and that was the reason we set it at moderate. But we did have that conversation internally, but we felt that was the right place to set it for the board, for the assurance that we're able to offer you, and until we get it back from Scottish Government that they're happy with everything we've submitted. So that was the reason for it being set to moderate. Don't know if that's a very good answer, but that's what we felt.
It's understandable. No, I absolutely appreciate that. I mean, we could argue that this is our assurance level and we can give it whatever assurance level we decide, regardless of what Scottish Government's feedback might be in the future. Well, we don't know what that'll be. And we can maybe, split the difference here or whatever and decide which way we want to go. I think, though, listening to what's been reported by yourselves and to echo Steve's point, and indeed the point that David made earlier, I think this is, a report that demonstrates success throughout the many stages of the National Treatment Centre, where it's got to now from the build through to the operation, all the stages and evolutions that it's gone through, right through to how the data and the evidence has been analysed and how we've extracted the learning from that. So I feel really quite happy with this, and I think, like David said, it is something to be celebrated. Emily, I'll bring you in quickly.
Sorry, yeah, I guess just a comment on the assurance thing. It comes back to the debate we've been having about what exactly are we assuring on. So, the project's clearly gone well. There were things that maybe weren't expected that made it take longer than it ought to have done, or there were things that you might argue could be learned from. But if we're assuring on whether we have the ability to learn from things like this, whether we have the data we need to analyze it in the depth that you've clearly done, then then it starts to look more like substantial. So I think it's just, what are we actually providing assurance on is really the question.
Yeah, and I suppose, Richard, I'll bring you in again to kind of respond to Emily's point, but just in anticipation of that feedback from Scottish Government, I suppose my question would be, do we have a feeling on what they might come back with? Because I'm struggling to scratch around my imagination to wonder what kind of they would be looking for that we haven't already provided in this very excellent document. So I don't know if you've got any kind of intelligence around that.
We don't. Gordon's been dealing with them, so I don't know if there's anything back from Gordon. Maybe I'll bring Gordon in on that.
We've had dialogue with Scottish Government throughout the development of the document, and taken advice from them in the background to make sure that the document is robust and meeting all the targets that have been set. They have come back with a couple of comments where there's been amendment made as we've been developing it. So we are confident that it will be received well.
Okay.
So I suppose that's one for us to take away then and look at that assurance level. I think it was just part of our debate about when we're bringing this forward. I think we felt the moderate was better because we were still bringing this to the board for feedback, but further development if required. But happy to change that assurance level if we.
Is that your Director of Estate's risk aversion coming in? Who's thinking about yes. that? I mean, really. I mean, I'll look to other board members for if anybody disagrees. But actually, I think, given what we've heard today and what we've seen, I would be proposing substantial assurance around that. We take on board the fact that Scottish Government may have their own feedback, but if we have taken that into consideration as we've built it through. And you know, we're struggling to think of a reason other than we don't have feedback yet to say why it isn't substantial. I think that as a board, we can take substantial assurance, recognising that we will build in feedback from Scottish Government as and when it comes. You know, we've demonstrated that we've already done that through the process, and there's no reason why we wouldn't do that going forward. Put up your hand if you're not happy with that. I'm not seeing any hands up. So we are going to take substantial assurance from this, and just a huge thank you to everybody for the work that's gone into this. I think it's a really great success. And thank you, Tina and Gordon. I realise we jigged the times around, so thank you for making the time to come and speak with us today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okie dokie. Right, I will move us on then. I've lost my place because I move things around. Okay, so item number 11, I apologise, a little bit behind schedule. Item number 11, we have our corporate risk register, and I will invite Boyd to speak to this item, please.
Thank you. As I get my mic unmuted. Thanks, Chair. The standard report with any changes per governance committee is supplied for the board papers. I will look to execs to support me, but I think we have no major changes. There may be some minor changes, and so the board, the paper is not substantially different to the previous version. In terms of things don't change always all that quickly, but if there's an exec who's got one that is notably different that I haven't picked up, please put your hand up. Otherwise, the paper is as submitted, and pass over for comments.
Thanks, Boyd. And I can see at the top of the paper there are a couple of changes as discussed previously, so that's great. Does anybody have any questions or comments around the risk register for Boyd? Okay, I'm not seeing any other hands up, so I think that's self-explanatory, and obviously has gone through our governance committees as well. So we are being asked to take substantial assurance from that, noting the content, of course. Is everybody happy with that? Yeah. Lovely. Thank you very much, Boyd. And that takes us on to item number 12. This is our blueprint for good governance. This is an update on where we are with that. And I'd like to invite Ruth to speak to this item, please.
Thank you, Sarah. So yes, this is the update since you had your last update in July. The report outlines that your improvement plan has 17 actions listed on it, and we can now report that 12 of those actions have now been completed. And the appendix to the report captures all of the progress that's been made on all of the actions across the whole of the plan. So the remaining actions on the plan are longer term, and they've got organisation-wide implications, and of course they will extend beyond the lifetime of this current plan. Nonetheless, there's been significant progress made on those items, and they fall essentially into two categories. Quality of care. As you'll remember, there was a joint session between the board and the area clinical forum. I think you referenced that earlier this morning, and there's ongoing activity to introduce a quality framework which will include patient feedback and experience. And the other element is our approach to risk appetite and management, and the review and revision of organisational controls and associated organisation-wide training is an ongoing activity. And like I've just said, that will extend beyond the lifespan of the plan. So this has gone through the governance committees over the last couple of cycles, and it's here, and the board's invited to take substantial assurance on the progress. We will continue to report progress to you, and committees will be asked to take informal assurance on progress with it, and the chairs group as well. There will be further reports presented later on in the year, and as far as I'm aware, Scottish Government will consider when they are going to roll out the next iteration of board level self-assessments against the blueprint. We've yet to hear from Scottish Government on that. But that's the state of the nation at the moment. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you, Ruth. And just a thank you to committee chairs and committees for their work on their different parts of this. I think that's been a real improvement on how maybe things had been done in the past. I think driving that through the committees has been really helpful. And just a note there, Ruth, about how this is going to be taken forward, or how Scottish Government would like us to take this forward in the next sort of phase. I suppose it's just to remind people that we were ahead of the timeline. So we were the first board to pilot this. So all the other boards are kind of now catching up with us, and we're kind of falling into line with the timescales that we're seeing across the country. So we are a little bit behind, but once everybody's caught up with us, and Scottish Government have decided how to take that forward, obviously we will bring that through the board. Any questions or comments on the blueprint? Okay, I'm not seeing any hands up. So we're being asked to take substantial assurance from that. Note the informal oversight of the plan is going through the chairs group and through the governance committee, and note that we will bring further update to the board in July. Is everybody happy with that? Great. Okay, this takes us on to item number 13. This is me. Fairly self-explanatory. This is just a paper to get the board's approval with regards to committee memberships. So, as I said at the top of the meeting, we're delighted to have Janice join us. So you can see from the paper there where we are going to add Janice into the mix of things there as we go forward. You'll notice that we are carrying forward a vacancy on audit. So just to let members know, in the last round of recruitment for our new non-executives, we did actually have a third member who was recruited who had a specific skill set around audit. Unfortunately, due to personal reasons, she hasn't been able to go forward with her appointment. So we are taking some time just to consider how we address that. But we have some great members and experience around that table at the moment, which will keep us going. And I will revisit this once I have some further clarity about future recruitment for non-execs. I'm happy to take any questions or comments. Hopefully that's fairly self-explanatory though. Not seeing any questions. So I'm offering you substantial assurance, and I am asking for the board to agree those changes as outlined in the paper. You happy with that? Lovely. Thank you very much. And that just brings us pretty much to the end. I'll pause for a moment in case anybody wishes to raise any other competent business. No, okay. So the date and time of our next board meeting is 9:30 AM on the 25th of March. But we'll see each other lots in between then at other meetings. Thank you very much, everybody. Have a good day.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.